The air was thick with tension as Karen stepped cautiously into the forbidden garden, unaware of the dangers that lurked within. Her curiosity had got the better of her, and now she was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Little did she know, this innocent trespass would unleash a chain of events that would shake her to the core. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the lush, manicured garden. Karen had always admired its beauty from afar, but today her desire to explore had overcome her better judgment. As she navigated the ornate wrought iron gate, a sense of unease washed over her. "This is private property," a gruff voice boomed, causing Karen to whirl around in surprise. Standing before her was the owner of the garden, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize," Karen stammered, her heart racing. "I was just admiring the flowers, and You're trespassing," the man interrupted, his voice laced with anger. "This garden is protected by federal law, and I won't hesitate to call the authorities." Karen's eyes widened in alarm. "Please, I didn't mean any harm. I'll leave immediately, I swear." "That's not good enough," the man growled, closing the distance between them. "You violated my privacy, and there are consequences for that." Panic gripped Karen as she realized the gravity of her mistake. She had stumbled into a situation far more serious than she could have imagined. Frantically, she searched for a way out, but the man's imposing presence blocked her path. "I'll give you one chance to leave, and if I ever catch you on my property again, you'll regret it," the man said, his tone menacing. Karen nodded shakily, her hands trembling as she turned to flee. But as she rushed towards the gate, a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach told her that this was far from over. Karen's heart pounded as she hurried down the sidewalk, her mind racing with the events that had just unfolded. The stern warning from the garden's owner echoed in her ears, sending a chill down her spine. She replayed the confrontation in her mind, cringing at her own foolishness. How could she have been so careless? Trespassing on private property, especially one protected by federal law, was a serious offense. The consequences could be dire, and the thought of it made her stomach twist with anxiety. As she reached her apartment, Karen paused, her hand on the doorknob. A sudden realization struck her. She couldn't keep this to herself. Fumbling for her phone, she quickly dialed her best friend, Samantha. "You'll never believe what just happened," Karen blurted out as soon as Samantha answered. Samantha listened intently, her eyes widening with each passing moment. "Oh my God, Karen, you have to be more careful. This isn't just some neighborhood dispute. You could be in real trouble." Karen nodded, her hands trembling. I know. I feel so stupid. I didn't even realize it was protected by federal law. What am I going to do?" Samantha paused, considering the gravity of the situation. "Okay. First, you need to stay away from that garden at all costs. Don't go near it, don't even look at it. And you should probably consult a lawyer, just to be on the safe side." "A lawyer?" Karen's voice cracked. "I can't afford a lawyer, Sam. I'm barely making ends meet as it is." I know, Samantha said, her tone sympathetic. "But this isn't something you can ignore. You need to take it seriously, Karen. Your freedom could be at stake." The weight of Samantha's words hit Karen like a ton of bricks. She sank down onto the couch, her head in her hands. How had a simple stroll through a beautiful garden turned into such a nightmare? As the reality of her predicament sank in, Karen felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She had to find a way to fix this, but the path forward was anything but clear. With a deep breath, she steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that her future now hung in the balance. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and uncertainty for Karen. The confrontation with the garden's owner replayed in her mind on a loop, the man's threatening words echoing in her head. She tried to push the incident to the back of her mind, focusing instead on her work and her meager social life. But no matter how hard she tried, the looming threat of legal consequences weighed heavily on her. "Samantha," ever the supportive friend, checked in regularly, offering advice and moral support. "Have you spoken to a lawyer yet?" she would ask, her voice laced with concern. "No, I can't afford one," Karen would respond, her words tinged with frustration. "And I don't even know where to start. What if they want a huge retainer or something?" Samantha sighed, her brow furrowed. "I understand your hesitation, but this is serious, Karen. You can't just ignore it and hope it goes away." Karen knew her friend was right, but the prospect of navigating the legal system filled her with dread. She was already struggling to make ends meet, and the thought of adding a hefty legal bill to her expenses was enough to make her nauseous. One evening, as Karen sat alone in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, a knock on the door startled her. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole, her breath catching in her throat when she recognized the stern-faced man from the garden. Panic gripped her as she fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice quivering. The man held up a hand, his expression surprisingly calm. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his deep voice rumbling. "I just wanted to talk to you." Karen eyed him warily, her heart pounding in her chest. "About what?" she asked, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. "About what happened the other day," the man replied, his gaze unwavering. "I may have been a bit too harsh with you." Karen blinked in surprise, her confusion evident on her face. I don't understand. Are you going to call the police?" The man shook his head, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. No, nothing like that. I just wanted to make sure you understand the seriousness of trespassing on my property. It's not something I take lightly." Karen nodded, her posture slowly relaxing. "I understand. I really do. I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I promise." The man nodded, his expression softening. "Good. I'm glad we could clear the air. I don't want any trouble, and I certainly don't want to see you in legal trouble either." As the man turned to leave, Karen felt a surge of relief wash over her. Maybe, just maybe, she had dodged a bullet. But deep down, she knew that the threat of consequences still loomed, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. In the days that followed, Karen found herself in a state of uneasy calm. The garden owner's unexpected visit had left her feeling both relieved and unsettled. While he had not followed through on his threat to call the authorities, the underlying tension remained. Karen spent her waking hours consumed by worry, constantly looking over her shoulder and jumpy at the slightest sound. She knew she needed to take action, but the prospect of facing the legal system filled her with dread. Samantha, ever the voice of reason, continued to gently nudge her friend to seek legal counsel. "You can't just ignore this, Karen. The longer you wait, the worse it could get." Reluctantly, Karen agreed. With Samantha's help, she began researching local attorneys who specialized in property law. The process was daunting, and the initial consultations only served to heighten her anxiety. "This is a serious matter," one lawyer warned, his brow furrowed. "Trespassing on federally protected land can result in hefty fines and even jail time. You need to take this very seriously." Karen felt her heart sink. The prospect of criminal charges was more than she could bear. She thanked the lawyer and shuffled out of his office, her mind racing with uncertainty. As she walked the streets, lost in thought, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of resentment towards the garden's owner. Why had he chosen to confront her so aggressively? Surely, there must have been a more compassionate way to handle the situation. "It's not fair," she muttered to herself, her jaw clenched with frustration. "I made a mistake, but does that really mean I could go to jail?" The more Karen dwelled on the injustice of it all, the more her anger began to simmer. Perhaps it was time to take a more proactive approach. Maybe there was a way to turn the tables and hold the garden owner accountable for his heavy-handed tactics. With a newfound determination, Karen headed home, her mind already whirring with a plan. She may have stumbled into this mess, but she was determined to find a way out. even if it meant going to war with a man who held her fate in his hands. Karen's newfound determination fueled her as she delved deeper into researching her options. She spent countless hours scouring legal databases, searching for any loopholes or precedents that could work in her favor. The more she learned, the more she realized the gravity of her situation. Trespassing on federally protected land was no small offense, and the potential consequences were severe. But Karen refused to be cowed by the weight of the law. She was determined to fight back. Emboldened by her research, Karen decided to take a bold step. She would confront the garden owner directly, this time armed with knowledge and a clear plan of action. As she approached the ornate wrought iron gate, her heart pounded in her chest. But she steeled her nerves, determined to assert her position. "I need to speak with you," she called out, her voice steady and unwavering. The garden owner emerged from the shadows, his brow furrowed with suspicion. "I thought I made myself clear the last time we spoke." Karen held up a hand, cutting him off. "I know, and I apologize for trespassing. But I've done some research, and I believe you may have overstepped your bounds." The man's eyes narrowed, his posture tensing. "What are you talking about?" "The law you're invoking to protect this garden. It's not as straightforward as you might think," Karen explained, her tone confident. "There are nuances and exceptions, and I believe I may have a case." The garden owner scoffed, his expression darkening. "You're threatening me?" "No, not at all," Karen replied quickly. "I'm simply stating that I believe I have grounds to challenge your actions, and I'm willing to take this to court if necessary." The man studied her for a long moment, his jaw clenched. "You've got a lot of nerve, coming here and making demands." "I'm not making demands," Karen countered, her resolve unwavering. "I'm simply asserting my rights, and I'm willing to fight for them, if that's what it takes." The tension in the air was palpable as the two stood face to face, each unwilling to back down. Karen knew she was walking a fine line, but she also knew that this was her best chance at avoiding the legal consequences she feared. Finally, the garden owner let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. "All right, fine. Let's talk this through. But I'm warning you, if you step foot on my property again, all bets are off." Karen nodded, relief and trepidation mingling in her chest. She had taken a bold step, and now the fate of her future rested in the hands of this stubborn, unyielding man. The meeting with the garden owner was tense and uneasy, but Karen refused to back down. She had done her research, and she was determined to use every legal avenue at her disposal to protect herself. As they sat across from each other in the man's ornate study, the air was thick with apprehension. Karen could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm and collected. "All right, let's hear it," the man grumbled, his arms crossed over his chest. "What grounds do you think you have to challenge me?" Karen took a deep breath, her mind racing as she carefully formulated her response. "From what I've discovered, the federal law you're invoking to protect this garden has some exceptions. Specifically, if the property is deemed to be of historical or cultural significance, the public may have limited access rights." The man's brow furrowed, and Karen could see the gears turning in his mind. "And you believe this garden meets that criteria?" "I do," Karen said, her voice steady. "The architectural elements, the rare and endangered plant species. This place has a unique historical and ecological value that could override the federal trespassing laws." The man leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Interesting. And what do you propose we do about this?" Karen steeled herself, knowing that her next words could make or break her case. "I'm willing to work with you to find a solution that satisfies both of our interests. Perhaps we could come to an agreement that allows for limited, controlled public access, while still preserving the integrity of the garden." The man regarded her silently for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. Karen felt the tension in the room ratchet up, her palms growing sweaty as she waited for his response. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh and nodded. All right, you've got my attention. Let's see if we can find a way to make this work. Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she quickly tamped down her elation. This was just the first step in a long and arduous process, and she knew she couldn't let her guard down for a moment. As the two began to discuss the terms of a potential agreement, Karen felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had taken a risk, and it had paid off, for now. But she knew that the true test would come in the days and weeks ahead as they navigated the complex legal landscape together. The negotiations between Karen and the garden owner were tense, with both parties fighting to protect their respective interests. Karen knew she was walking a fine line, and any misstep could potentially land her in legal jeopardy. Over the course of several meetings, the two hashed out the details of a potential agreement. The garden owner was adamant about maintaining strict control over the property, while Karen pushed for greater public access and preservation of the site's historical and ecological significance. "Look, I understand your concerns," Karen said, her brow furrowed with determination. "But this garden is a unique and valuable asset to the community. Surely, we can find a way to balance your need for privacy with the public's right to enjoy and appreciate this space." The garden owner's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes narrowing. "I've spent years, decades, cultivating and protecting this garden. I won't just hand it over to the masses." Karen nodded, her mind racing as she searched for a compromise. "What if we established a system of guided tours, limited to a certain number of visitors per day? That way, the public could experience the garden without compromising your privacy or the delicate ecosystem." The man considered her proposal, his fingers drumming against the polished wood of his desk. "And who would be responsible for managing these tours? I'm not about to let just anyone waltz in here and trample my prized plants." "I could oversee the operation," Karen offered, her heart pounding in her chest. "I have a background in horticulture, and I'm deeply invested in preserving the integrity of this place." The garden owner scrutinized her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "And what's in it for you exactly?" Karen took a deep breath, steeling herself for his reaction. "If we can reach an agreement, it would allow me to avoid any legal consequences for my trespass. And in return, I'll make sure the garden is properly maintained and protected." The man's brow furrowed, and for a moment, Karen feared he would reject the proposal outright. But then, something seemed to shift in his demeanor, and he leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "All right, I'm willing to hear you out, but this is a delicate situation, and any misstep on your part could land you in serious trouble. Are you sure you're up for the challenge?" Karen nodded, her resolve hardening. "I am. I'm committed to making this work, for both of us." As the two shook hands, sealing the agreement, Karen felt a surge of relief and cautious optimism. She had managed to navigate a treacherous legal minefield, but the real test was yet to come. The weeks that followed the agreement between Karen and the garden owner were a whirlwind of activity. Karen threw herself into the task of establishing the guided tour program, working tirelessly to ensure that every detail was meticulously planned and executed. She recruited a team of passionate volunteers, each with their own unique expertise in horticulture, history, and conservation. Together, they crafted a comprehensive tour that highlighted the garden's stunning beauty, its rich cultural heritage, and the delicate ecological balance that the owner was so dedicated to preserving. As the first group of visitors arrived, Karen felt a surge of nervous anticipation. Would the owner hold up his end of the bargain? Would the tours be a success, or would they be met with resistance and backlash? To her relief, the inaugural tour was a resounding triumph. The guests were awestruck by the garden's splendor, and they left with a newfound appreciation for the importance of protecting such a unique and precious space. The word quickly spread, and before long, the tours were booked solid for weeks in advance. Karen's hard work and dedication had paid off, and the partnership between her and the garden owner blossomed into a mutually beneficial arrangement. As she walked the garden's winding paths, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The once daunting situation had been transformed into a solution that benefited both the community and the owner, all while sparing her from the legal consequences she had feared. But the true testament to the success of their arrangement came when the garden owner approached her one day, his expression softening. "You know, I have to hand it to you, Karen. You really have done an amazing job with these tours. I never thought I'd be able to share this place with the public, but you've made it work in a way that preserves the integrity of the garden." Karen felt a warm smile spread across her face. "Thank you. I'm so glad we were able to find a way to make this work. It's been a true pleasure to be a part of this." The garden owner nodded, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. "Well, keep up the good work, and if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." As the owner turned and made his way back into the garden, Karen felt a sense of profound gratitude and relief. What had once been a harrowing ordeal had transformed into a triumph, a testament to the power of perseverance, compromise, and a shared commitment to preserving the beauty and history of a truly remarkable place.